The rancher refused to buy her horse for $10, then offered her something she never expected. By the time Emma Whitaker reached the iron gate of the Broken Star Ranch, the sun was already sliding low over the Montana hills, and she had only one thing left in the world worth selling. It was not the little farmhouse her father had built with his own hands. It was not the patch of dry land where she had buried every hope after his death. It was not the old cedar chest beside her bed, filled with letters, winter blankets, and the blue ribbon her mother had worn on her wedding day. It was the horse walking beside her, a tall white gelding named Mercy. He moved with calm steps through the road dust, his ears flicking every time Emma's hand trembled on the reins. He had carried her through snow, rain, grief, and lonely market mornings. He had been her father's last gift and the only living thing that still seemed to remember the sound of laughter around the Whitaker place. And now she had brought him here to sell him for $10. Emma stopped outside the gate and looked up at the ranch house beyond the long drive. The Broken Star was the kind of place that made a poor woman remember exactly how poor she was. There were clean fences, strong barns, cattle moving like dark shadows across the pasture, and smoke lifting steady from the chimney as if hunger had never entered that kitchen. Her own kitchen had 2 cold biscuits on the table and a kettle with nothing left to boil. Mercy nudged her shoulder. "I know," she whispered, pressing her fingers against his soft white neck. "I hate it too." The horse breathed warm against her sleeve, and for one weak moment Emma almost turned him around. She almost chose the road home, chose shame later instead of heartbreak now. But then she saw Mr. Silas Ward's paper in her mind again, folded neat on her kitchen table. $14 due before sundown. She had $4.30. The rest had to come from somewhere. Her father used to say that a person could survive bad weather, bad luck, and bad neighbors, but not a debt that had learned your name. Silas Ward had learned hers. He had stood on her porch that morning in his polished boots, looking past her shoulder into the house as if already choosing what would be taken first. "If the payment is not made today, Miss Whitaker," he had said, "I will begin the filing in town tomorrow. After that there will be fees. Once there are fees, you will not catch up." He said it politely. That was the cruelest part. He did not shout, he did not threaten, he simply spoke like a man reading the weather. So Emma baked the last flour into bread, sold 3 loaves to Mrs. Pritchard, took in 2 mending jobs, counted every coin twice and still came up short. Then she went to the paddock. Mercy had lifted his head when he saw her, as if he knew before she spoke. Her father had brought him home 6 years earlier, when Emma was still young enough to believe a white horse could carry sorrow away. "If hard times ever force your hand," her father had told her near the end, his voice thin but steady, "take Mercy to Daniel Boone at the Broken Star. He knows horses, he knows fairness. He will not mistreat what belongs to you." Emma had remembered those words because they had sounded strange at the time. Her father had not said, "If you need help." He had not said, "If you need money." He had said, "If hard times force your hand." Now hard times had done exactly that. She opened the gate and led Mercy in. A ranch hand near the corral looked up first, then another. Men always noticed a woman walking into a ranch yard alone, especially one with dust on her hem, worry in her eyes, and a horse fine enough to make even tired cowboys stand straighter. Emma kept her chin up. Near the round pen, Daniel Boone was working with a young bay mare. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and quiet in the way of men who did not waste movement. His hat shaded most of his face, but Emma knew him well enough by sight. Everyone in Pine Hollow knew Daniel Boone. He had inherited the Broken Star after his uncle died, and built it into one of the strongest ranches in the valley without ever making much noise about it. He saw Emma at the gate and handed the mare's rope to a gray-haired hand beside him. Then he came toward her. With every step he took, Emma felt the words drying in her throat. Daniel stopped a few feet away and removed his hat. "Miss Whitaker." Mr. Boone. Mercy shifted beside her, his hoof scraping softly against packed dirt. Daniel's eyes moved from Emma's face to the horse, then back again. He did not ask why she had come. Maybe he already knew. Maybe trouble had a smell and she had ridden in covered with it. Emma swallowed. I need you to buy Mercy. The ranch yard seemed to grow quieter. Daniel looked at the horse again. Mercy stood calm and beautiful in the afternoon light, his white coat dusty from the road, his dark eyes gentle as a prayer. Even a blind man could tell he was worth more than $10. Daniel said nothing. His silence nearly broke her. Emma reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the folded paper from Sela's ward. Her fingers shook, so she held the paper tighter. I owe money in town, she said. If I do not pay before sundown, Mr. Ward starts the filing tomorrow. I need $9.70. I am asking 10. Daniel's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. You are asking $10 for that horse. I know what he is worth. Then why ask 10? Because I do not need what he is worth. Her voice cracked and she hated herself for it. I need what will save my land today. A faint wind moved through the yard. Somewhere near the barn, a loose lantern hook tapped against wood. One of the ranch hands looked down at his boots. Daniel did not move. He studied her the way a man studies a storm cloud, not afraid of it but careful with what it might bring. Your father gave him to you, he said. Emma's breath caught. Yes. He was proud of that horse. He was proud of many things he could not keep. Daniel looked at her then and something changed in his face. Not pity. Emma would have walked out if she saw pity. It was something quieter, something like pain held behind a locked door. I cannot buy him from you, he said. For 1 second, Emma did not understand. Then the word struck. She had prepared herself for bargaining. She had prepared herself for shame. She had even prepared herself for a rancher pretending the horse was worth less than he was. She had not prepared herself for no. Her fingers tightened around Mercy's reins. I see, she said, though she did not see anything at all. Daniel stepped closer, but not too close. No, Miss Whitaker. I mean, I will not take the last thing your father left you and call it business. Her eyes burned. Business is all I have left. That is not true. She looked at him sharply. Daniel glanced toward the ranch house, then back at her. My housekeeper left 2 months ago. My accounts are behind, the pantry is a mess, the men eat when someone remembers to cook, and I have more work inside that house than my hands know what to do with. He paused. Your father told me once that you kept better books than any man in this valley. Emma stared at him. Daniel reached into his vest and pulled out a small leather purse. I will advance you $10 for honest work, $3 a week. You keep your land, you keep Mercy. He stays here if feed is a worry, or you ride him back and forth if that suits you better. Emma could hear her own heartbeat. This sounds like Charity dressed up in work clothes. Daniel's mouth almost softened. No, Charity asks nothing of you. I am asking plenty. She looked past him at the ranch house, the barn, the clean fences, the life that looked steady from the road. Then she looked at Mercy, who had lowered his head and was calmly nosing at the dust as if the whole matter had already been settled. My father told me to bring him to you, she whispered. Daniel held her gaze. Maybe he did not only mean the horse. The words settled between them like the first snow of winter, quiet and impossible to ignore. Emma did not answer right away. Pride pulled one way, fear pulled another. Behind both stood the memory of her father, his worn hand resting on Mercy's neck, his voice low with meaning she had not understood until this moment. At last she lifted her chin. I will take the work, she said, but I will earn every penny. Daniel nodded once. I expect you will. He held out the $10. Emma looked at the coins in his palm, then at the man offering them without reaching for her horse. For the first time all day, she could breathe. But as her fingers closed around the money, she noticed something on Daniel's wrist, half hidden beneath his cuff. A thin leather braid. Her father had worn one just like it the year before he died. Emma's eyes stayed on it a moment too long. Daniel noticed. And the quiet in his face told her he knew exactly what she had seen. Emma paid Sela's ward with 21 minutes of daylight left. She walked into his narrow office in Pine Hollow with dust on her skirt, road wind in her hair, and Daniel Boone's $10 wrapped in the corner of her handkerchief. The office smelled of ink, old paper, and the kind of cold patience that belonged to men who made their living waiting for others to fail. Silas looked up from behind his desk. For the briefest moment, surprise crossed his face. Emma saw it. He had not expected her to come. That gave her enough strength to step forward without letting her knees tremble. "I have the payment," she said. Silas leaned back slowly, his fingers folding over his vest. He was a thin man with pale eyes and polished boots, the kind of man who never raised his voice because the law did it for him. The full amount. $14. She placed the coins on his desk one by one. Each coin made a hard sound against the wood. Emma heard every one of them like a nail being pulled out of a coffin. Silas counted slowly, then counted again. His mouth tightened when the number did not change. "You came into money quickly," he said. "I came into work." His eyes lifted. "At the Broken Star." Emma said nothing. Silas smiled, but there was no warmth in it. A woman alone ought to be careful accepting help from rich ranchers. Folks talk. Emma's hand closed at her side. "My account is paid for the month, Mr. Ward." "For the month," he repeated, "not cleared." "No, not cleared." He opened his ledger and wrote the payment down with slow, neat strokes. He wanted her to watch. He wanted her to remember that his book still held her name. When he finished, he dipped the pen again and looked at her over the rim of his spectacles. "You still owe the remaining balance. Miss a payment again and I will not come to your porch twice." Emma picked up the receipt. "You came twice because you wanted me scared before you wanted me late." Silas's smile vanished. The words had slipped out before she could stop them, but once they were there, she did not take them back. For a moment the office went still. Then Silas closed the ledger. "Pride is expensive, Miss Whitaker." Emma folded the receipt and slipped it into her pocket. "So is borrowing from the wrong man." She turned and walked out before fear could catch up with her. Outside, Pine Hollow was glowing in the last orange light of evening. Wagons creaked along the street. A boy swept the front step of the general store. Two women paused near the dry goods window and watched Emma as if they already knew more than she had told anyone. Maybe they did. News moved faster than horses in small towns. Mercy stood tied near the rail, patient and bright in the dusty street. When Emma reached him, she pressed her forehead to his neck and shut her eyes. "I did not sell you," she whispered. The horse breathed into her sleeve. That was all the answer she needed. She rode home slowly, though she had chores waiting and bread still cooling on the table. The sky above Montana turned purple at the edges, and the mountains stood dark and quiet like old witnesses. The wind moved through the dry grass, carrying the smell of coming cold. Her father's farmhouse looked smaller when she reached it. A single lantern burned in the front window. She had left it there before riding out because she hated coming home to darkness. The little place had once felt full with her father's boots by the stove, his coffee cup near the ledger, his rough voice humming hymns badly while he mended fence rope at the table. Now the house sounded too clean. Too empty. Emma unsaddled Mercy, brushed him longer than she needed to, and checked his feed twice. There was not much left. Daniel had offered a paddock at Broken Star, and pride had kept her from answering that part clearly. She looked at the feed bin and knew pride did not fill it. Inside, she set the receipt beside her father's old ledger. Her fingers rested on the cracked leather cover. She opened it to a page from 2 years before and saw his handwriting, strong and slanted, marking oats, seed, winter nails, and one line that made her throat tighten. Mercy shoeing paid fair, good animal worth keeping. Emma closed the ledger. Then she took out the $10 advance receipt Daniel had written in a steady hand before she left his ranch. He had insisted on writing it down, not because he distrusted her, he said, but because clear terms kept good people from feeling beholden. The words had stayed with her the whole ride to town. Clear terms. $3 a week. Household accounts, provisions, pantry, meal planning, and light cooking when needed. Advance of $10 to be worked off through wages. No sale of horse. Emma read the paper again by lantern light. She had expected Daniel Boone to be kind to Mercy. She had not expected him to be careful with her dignity. That was more dangerous than kindness. Kindness could be thanked and forgotten. Dignity reached deeper. She folded the paper and placed it beneath her father's ledger. Only then did she remember the leather braid on Daniel's wrist. Her father's leather braid. Or something close enough to make her chest ache. She could still see the way Daniel's face changed when she noticed it. Not guilt, exactly, not surprise either, more like a man guarding a promise he had hoped would stay buried one day longer. Emma slept poorly that night. She dreamed of her father standing at the paddock fence, one hand on Mercy's neck, the other held out toward the broken star gate. In the dream, she kept asking him what he meant. He only looked at her with sad, patient eyes and said nothing. When morning came, frost silvered the grass. Emma rose before dawn, pulled on her work dress, pinned her hair tight, and made coffee strong enough to steady her hands. She packed a small cloth bag with her ledger pencil, sewing scissors, and the receipt from Daniel. Then she stepped outside. Mercy waited near the fence. "You and I are not begging," she told him softly. "We are working." The ride to Broken Star took less than 15 minutes, but every hoofbeat felt like the start of a life she had not agreed to yet. The ranch came into view under a pale morning sky. Smoke rose from the chimney. Men moved near the barn. A rooster shouted like he owned the place. Daniel was already in the yard. He turned when he heard Mercy's steps. Emma saw his eyes move first to the horse, then to her face, as if checking whether both had survived the night. "You came," he said. "I accepted work." A faint smile touched his mouth. "So you did." Emma dismounted and handed Mercy's reins to a young ranch hand who looked nervous enough to drop them. "His name is Mercy," she said. "He does not like being jerked, he does not need shouting, and if anyone calls him pretty like it is an insult, I will hear about it." The young man blinked. Daniel coughed once into his fist. "Yes, ma'am," the hand said quickly. Emma turned back to Daniel. "Show me the accounts." That seemed to surprise him more than anything else. He led her into the house. The Broken Star kitchen was large, warm, and completely without order. Flour sat too close to lamp oil. Salt pork was wrapped badly. Coffee was stored in 3 different places. A sack of beans had been left open near a draft. Receipts were stacked under a chipped blue bowl beside a jar of nails beneath what appeared to be a broken spur. Emma stood in the doorway and stared. Daniel watched her face. "How bad?" he asked. Emma removed her gloves slowly. "Mr. Boone, I believe your cattle are better managed than your kitchen." From the back room, someone laughed and quickly turned it into a cough. Daniel nodded as if he deserved that. "I suspected as much." "No," Emma said, stepping inside. "You feared as much. Suspecting would have led to action." This time the hidden laugh was louder. Daniel looked toward the back room. "Eli, if you are enjoying yourself, come carry these sacks." A tall ranch hand with a gray mustache appeared, grinning like he had been waiting years for someone to say what Emma had just said. "Yes, boss." Emma set her bag on the table, rolled up her sleeves, and opened the first ledger. By noon, she had found 3 unpaid receipts, 2 overpaid accounts, 1 missing order of coffee, and enough wasted flour to make her press her lips together for nearly a full minute. Daniel came in quietly while she was sorting supplier papers. She did not look up. "Who orders your provisions?" "I do." "That must stop." Eli made a sound near the stove. Daniel ignored him. "Fair enough." Emma finally looked at him. Most men would have bristled. Most men would have defended themselves just to prove they still held the reins. Daniel only stood there with his hat in his hands and the calm expression of a man who knew when he was beaten by facts. That unsettled her. "You are not offended?" she asked. "I hired you because I needed help." Men often say that until help tells them they were wrong. Daniel's eyes held hers. "Then I will try not to be most men." The room went quiet. Emma looked away first. A horse shifted outside the window. The wind brushed against the glass. Somewhere in the house, the broken spur rolled off the counter and hit the floor with a sharp clink. Emma bent to pick it up, but Daniel reached it first. As he did, his sleeve pulled back. The leather braid showed again. This close, there was no mistake. Emma knew the small brass thread woven through it. She had watched her father twist that thread in by firelight years ago. Her hand froze above the ledger. Daniel saw her looking. For a long second, neither of them spoke. Then Emma's voice came low and careful. "Where did you get that?" Daniel did not answer quickly. That troubled Emma more than any lie might have. A man who lied usually hurried to cover the hole. Daniel Boone only stood in the middle of his disorderly kitchen with a broken spur in one hand, his sleeve fallen back, and her father's leather braid around his wrist as if the past had reached across the table and taken hold of him. Emma's eyes stayed on the braid. It was old now, darkened by weather, soft at the edges from years of wear, but the little twist of brass wire was still there, tucked through the leather just where her father had placed it. She remembered sitting by the stove as a girl, watching him work it between his rough fingers. "Your mother said a plain thing can still carry beauty," he had told her. "You just have to know where to put the shine." She had laughed then. She was not laughing now. "Mr. Boone," she said, her voice quieter than before, "where did you get that?" Daniel looked down at his wrist as if he had forgotten he wore it, but Emma knew he had not forgotten. No one forgot a thing like that. He set the broken spur on the counter. "Your father gave it to me." Emma's face tightened. "My father gave you his braid?" "Yes." "When?" Daniel took in a slow breath. Outside, a horse struck the ground once, and the sound came through the window like a warning. "About a month before he passed." Emma felt the kitchen tilt beneath her. A month before her father died, he had already been weak. He had still insisted on walking to the barn every morning, leaning on the fence rail longer than he would admit, pretending his breath did not hurt him. He had spent those last weeks putting things in order: the ledgers, the feed notes, the fence line repairs, the little chest with her mother's ribbon. He had not told her he gave his braid to Daniel Boone. "Why?" she asked. Daniel rubbed his thumb over the worn leather. "He said a man should keep a promise where he can feel it." Emma stared at him. "What promise?" Daniel's eyes lifted to hers. "That if trouble came after he was gone, I would not look away from you." The room went still. Eli, who had been pretending not to hear from near the stove, stopped moving entirely. The fire snapped softly in the black iron belly of the stove. Dust floated in a band of morning light between Emma and Daniel, tiny and bright and almost peaceful, though nothing inside her felt peaceful at all. Emma stepped back from the table. "My father asked you to watch me. He asked me to be a neighbor." "That is not the same thing." "No," Daniel said, "it is not." Her cheeks warmed, not from shyness, but from anger rising too fast. "So all this time," she said, When I was hauling bread to market and sewing until my eyes burned, when I was patching my own roof and counting coins by lantern light, you knew. Daniel's face changed, and this time the pain in it was clear. I knew enough to worry, but not enough to knock. His jaw moved once. No. The answer was honest. That made it worse. Emma turned away from him and looked at the ledgers, the flour sacks, the shelves she had meant to fix, the evidence of a man who could manage 500 acres but had somehow failed to cross one fence line. Her hands trembled, so she pressed them flat against the table. My father would not have wanted me treated like a helpless child. I know. Do you? Daniel did not defend himself. That silence only made the anger sharpen. Emma turned back. You stood on your ridge and watched my lamp burn. Daniel looked at her carefully. Yes. How often? Often enough. The words struck deeper than she expected. She pictured herself during those nights, shoulders aching from stitching, hands red from cold water, grief sitting across from her like another person at the table. She had believed she was unseen. That had been painful but clean. Now she knew she had been seen. Seen and left alone. Her voice dropped. Then you know I did not ask because I was trying to survive with what dignity I had left. Yes, Daniel said. And yesterday at your gate when you offered work, was that because of this promise? He looked down at the leather braid. In part. Emma flinched as if he had touched a bruise. Daniel saw it and stepped forward. But not only because of that. Your father spoke of your skill. I needed someone with your skill. That is the truth. The truth should have come first. I know. She hated how quickly he admitted fault. She wanted to argue with pride, not honesty. Pride gave her something to push against. Honesty stood there and let her see the wound. Eli cleared his throat from near the stove. Daniel did not look away from Emma. Eli, he said, give us the room. The older ranch hand took his hat from the peg and left without a word, though he paused at the door long enough to give Emma a look that held more kindness than curiosity. When the door closed, the house felt too large. Emma gathered the scattered receipts into a neat pile because her hands needed work. Daniel remained where he was. I should have told you yesterday, he said. Yes. I should have told you before yesterday. Yes. And I should have visited after James died. At the sound of her father's name, Emma's hand stopped. Daniel spoke carefully. I came once. She looked up. When? The week after the funeral. I never saw you. No, I got as far as the gate. His voice was rougher now. I saw you in the yard with Mercy. You were standing straight as a fence post, crying into that horse's mane where no one could see your face. I thought if I walked in, I would be taking that last private place from you. Emma's anger faltered just a little. Daniel looked toward the window. So I left. Then one day became two. Then I told myself if you needed help, you would ask. That sounded respectful enough to hide behind. Emma looked down. The kitchen floor had a line of old mud near the back door. Men had tracked it in for months. She noticed it because noticing small problems was easier than looking at Daniel's face. My father trusted you, she said. He did. I do not know if I do. I would not ask you to decide today. That made her look at him. Daniel took the leather braid from his wrist, slowly, carefully. He placed it on the table between them. Emma stared at it as if it were alive. He gave it to me with a promise, Daniel said, but it belongs to your family, you can take it back. Her throat tightened. The braid lay in the morning light, old and plain, with the little brass thread still holding its shine. Emma reached for it, then stopped. She wanted to take it. She wanted to put it in her pocket and leave this house and never let Daniel Boone have power over another memory. But beneath that want was something softer and harder to name. Her father had given it to him. Not by accident. Not carelessly. James Whitaker had never wasted a thing, not money, not words, not trust. Emma closed her fingers, but not around the braid. Around the edge of the ledger. No, she said. Daniel's eyes lifted. No. You will keep it for now. He said nothing. But do not mistake that for forgiveness. I won't. And do not mistake my working here for weakness. I never have. Emma studied him. His answer came too quickly to be false. She looked back at the accounts. There are supplier mistakes in these papers, she said, her voice steadying because work was safer than feeling. 2 overpayments, maybe 3. Your coffee order is wrong, your flour storage is careless, and whoever has been keeping these receipts under a bowl should not be allowed near paper again. Daniel almost smiled. That would be me. Then I stand by what I said. This time the faint smile came and went. Emma picked up her pencil. I will finish today because I gave my word. After that we will see. Daniel nodded. Fair terms. Yes, she said, fair terms. The morning passed in a strange quiet. Emma worked through the ledgers while Daniel came and went, answering questions, moving sacks and sending men to fetch papers from places no paper should have been kept. Once, she found a receipt folded inside an empty coffee tin. Another had been used to wedge a window against the wind. By late afternoon, she had built 3 piles on the table. Paid. Unpaid. Foolishness. Eli returned, glanced at the 3rd pile and pointed. That one for me. Depends, Emma said. Did you put an invoice inside a horseshoe box? Eli looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at the ceiling. Emma made a mark in the ledger. I will take that as yes. For the first time since morning, she heard Daniel laugh. It was not loud, but it warmed the room in a way she was not ready to appreciate. Near sunset, Emma stepped outside to check on Mercy. The white horse stood in a clean paddock with fresh hay, looking far too pleased with himself. He lifted his head when she came, chewing slowly as if he had always known he deserved better lodging. Emma rested her hand on his neck. You are enjoying this, she whispered. Mercy flicked one ear. Behind her, Daniel stopped at a respectful distance. I asked Eli to fill the feed bin at your place tomorrow, he said. I will put the cost against my own account unless you prefer it charged to wages. Emma turned slowly. Daniel seemed to realize his mistake at the same time she did. He raised both hands slightly. I am asking, he said. That should not have touched her. It did. Emma looked back at Mercy, at the snow beginning to gather along the fence posts, at the hills turning blue under evening. She thought of her own empty feed bin. She thought of pride. She thought of a horse who had carried her through too much to go hungry because she was angry. Charge it to wages, she said. Daniel nodded. As you choose. The word settled softly. As you choose. Emma kept her hand on Mercy's neck and watched the last light fall across the broken star yard. She did not trust Daniel Boone yet. She did not know what her father had seen in him. She did not know why one leather braid could make her feel both betrayed and protected. But she knew one thing. The promise her father left behind was not finished. And somewhere inside the house, in a pile of old papers Daniel had not wanted her to see, one more secret was waiting with her name on it. If this moment made you wonder what Emma's father truly planned, stay with the story, because some promises on the frontier were written long before anyone understood them. By the next morning, snow had come thin and quiet over Pine Hollow, dusting the rooftops, fence rails, and wagon tracks until the whole valley looked softer than it truly was. Emma arrived at the Broken Star just after dawn with her collar turned up and her hands tucked beneath her coat. Mercy stepped proudly through the yard as if he had slept in a royal stable instead of a ranch paddock. When Emma dismounted, she found a fresh wool blanket folded across the fence, waiting for him. She knew Daniel had put it there. She also knew he had not stayed to be thanked. That made it harder to stay angry. She left Mercy with Eli, then went inside before her thoughts could betray her. The kitchen was already warm. Coffee sat on the stove. A plate of biscuits had been set near the table, covered with a clean cloth. Emma stood looking at them for a moment. The biscuits were uneven, slightly too brown on the bottom, and made by a man who did not know the difference between a pinch and a handful. Daniel came in from the back room, carrying an armful of split wood. "I made breakfast," he said. "I see that." He set the wood by the stove. "I thought it might help." Emma lifted the cloth and looked at the biscuits again. Did anyone survive eating them? Daniel's face stayed serious, but his eyes warmed. Eli had too. Eli would eat a saddle strap if it came with coffee. From outside, Eli's voice called through the door, "That is not false." Emma almost smiled, almost. She sat at the table and pulled the account papers toward her, glad for the work. Work had edges. Numbers behaved if a person took hold of them firmly enough. People were less reliable. Daniel poured coffee and set a cup near her, not too close. "I found more papers last night," he said. Emma looked up. "Where?" "In the desk drawer in my office." "That is where papers usually belong." "Yes," he said, "that is why I was surprised to find them there." This time Emma could not stop the small breath of laughter that escaped her. She covered it by opening the folder he had brought. Inside were old receipts, livestock counts, a letter from a feed supplier, and a sealed envelope yellowed at the edges. Emma's hand paused over it. Her name was written across the front. Miss Emma Whitaker. Not in Daniel's hand. In her father's. The room changed around her. The stove still ticked, coffee still steamed. A ranch hand still crossed the yard outside the window, but Emma could no longer hear any of it clearly. Her father's handwriting sat on that envelope like a voice returned from the grave. Daniel saw it when she did. "I did not know that was in there," he said quietly. Emma did not answer. Her fingertips brushed the old paper, but she did not pick it up. "When did you get this?" she asked. Daniel came no closer. "Your father left a packet with me before he died. The braid was with it. I put the packet in my desk and read only the part addressed to me. I thought the rest was notes about fence agreements and shared water access." His face tightened. "I should have looked more carefully." Emma gave him a sharp look. "You should have given it to me." "Yes." The honesty came again, steady and unwelcome. Emma picked up the envelope. Her hands trembled so badly the paper made a soft crackling sound. Daniel turned away slightly, giving her the mercy of not watching too closely. She broke the seal. Inside was one folded letter. "My dear Emma, if this letter has reached your hands, then I was right to worry and wrong to hope you would never need it." Emma pressed her lips together. The words blurred, but she forced herself to read on. "You have always been stronger than you knew and more stubborn than was useful. I say that with love because I gave you some of that stubbornness myself. I know you will try to hold the farm alone. I know you will refuse help until your hands are raw and your heart is tired. But child, there is no shame in standing beside good people when the road grows too hard. I have asked Daniel Boone to keep an eye on the fence line and the lower pasture. I have also told him what you will never tell him yourself, that you know books better than most clerks in town, and that any ranch would be blessed to have your mind inside its walls." Emma stopped reading. Her breath shook once. Daniel stood at the far side of the kitchen, looking at the floor. She continued, "If you find yourself with Mercy at his gate, do not think I sent you there to sell him. A horse named Mercy should not be sold out of fear. I sent you because Daniel knows how to offer help without making a person feel small if he remembers to speak before acting. He is a good man, though good men are sometimes slow in the wrong places." A tear slipped down Emma's cheek before she could stop it. She wiped it quickly, almost angrily. There is something else. Silas Ward is not the first man to hold paper against this land. Years ago, before you were born, I signed a boundary note with his father after a survey mistake. That note was settled in full. If Silas ever claims more than he should, ask Daniel to show you the lower drawer in his office. I left a copy with him because I did not trust Ward blood with honest paper. Emma lowered the letter. Her heart had begun to pound. Daniel looked up. What is it? She looked at the envelope again, then at him. My father says there is a paper in your office, a boundary note, something settled years ago. Daniel's expression changed at once. He crossed the room, then stopped himself before coming too close. The lower drawer, he said. Emma folded the letter with careful hands. Take me there. They went down the short hall to Daniel's office. It was a plain room with a desk, a map of the valley, a rifle locked above the mantel, and stacks of ranch papers that looked less wild than the kitchen had, but only slightly. Daniel opened the lower drawer. Inside were land maps, old agreements, tax papers, and a flat tin box. Emma knew the tin box. It had belonged to her father. Her knees weakened. Daniel pulled it out and set it on the desk. The lid stuck at first, then gave with a soft scrape. Inside lay 3 folded documents tied with faded green string. Emma untied them. The first was a survey copy from 18 years earlier. The second was a paid note signed by Silas Ward's father. The third made Emma's blood run cold. It was a claim release. Paid in full. Recorded. Stamped. Her father's land had no valid boundary debt attached to it. Emma stared at the paper. If this is true, she whispered, then Silas has been charging me on a debt that should not exist. Daniel's face hardened, but his voice stayed low. Not all of it. Maybe your recent loan was real, but if he tied penalties or pressure to an old claim, then he had no right. Emma gripped the edge of the desk. Silas Ward had not only waited for her to fail. He may have helped build the trap. A sound came from the doorway. Eli stood there, hat in hand, his usual humor gone. Boss, he said carefully, Ward just rode in. Emma turned. Through the office window, she saw Silas Ward dismount in the yard, brushing snow from his coat, as if he had every right to stand there. Daniel looked at Emma. This is your paper, he said, your choice. Emma looked down at her father's letter, then at the claim release in her hand. For 14 months she had fought with bread, needles, coins, and silence. Now her father had handed her something sharper than anger. Truth. She lifted her chin. Bring him inside, she said. Silas Ward entered the Broken Star kitchen like a man who believed every room became smaller when he stepped inside. He removed his gloves finger by finger, slow and neat, then looked around at the table, the stove, the ledgers, and finally at Emma. His pale eyes rested on the documents in her hand, but only for a heartbeat. After that, he smiled as if he had found her exactly where he expected her to be. Miss Whitaker, he said, I thought I might find you here. Emma stood beside the table with her father's letter folded against her palm and the claim release beneath it. Her heart was beating too hard, but her face stayed calm. She had learned calm from too many market mornings, too many unpaid bills, too many hours pretending she was not afraid while men like Silas explained her own trouble to her. Daniel stood near the stove, silent. Eli remained by the back door, arms folded, watching. Silas glanced at them both and gave a small laugh. I hope I am not interrupting household business. You are, Emma said. The smile thinned. Daniel looked at her and she knew he had caught the slight tremble under her words. He did not step in. He did not answer for her. He only stayed where he was, close enough to help if asked, far enough to let her stand. That mattered more than she wanted it to. Silas placed his hat on the table without being invited. I came to save myself a second trip, he said. Your payment yesterday covered the month, but after reviewing your account, I discovered additional fees connected to the old boundary note on your lower pasture. Emma's fingers tightened around the papers. How much? $26. Eli let out a low whistle before Daniel could stop him. Silas's eyes flicked toward the older ranch hand. Legal matters often surprise men who do not understand them. Eli smiled without warmth. I understand stealing just fine. The kitchen went sharp and quiet. Silas turned back to Emma. I would advise your hired company to be careful with words. Emma lifted her chin. And I would advise you to be careful with papers. For the first time, something uncertain moved across Silas Ward's face. Emma laid the claim release on the table. The old paper looked small there, yellowed and soft at the folds, but the stamp at the bottom was clear, paid in full, recorded in the county office, signed by Silas Ward's father and James Whitaker. Silas stared at it. His jaw tightened almost too quickly to see. Where did you get that? My father kept copies where dishonest men would not think to look. Silas reached for the paper. Daniel moved one step. Not fast, not threatening, just enough. Silas's hand stopped. Emma kept her voice steady. You told me for months that the lower pasture claim made my position weak. You said if I fell behind, you could add filings, fees, and county action because the land had a history of unsettled debt. But this says the boundary note was settled before I was born. That old note has no bearing on your recent loan. Then why did you mention it every time you wanted me afraid? Silas's mouth pressed into a hard line. Outside, wind dragged loose snow against the porch. Mercy gave a soft call from the paddock, and the sound slipped through the window like a reminder of why Emma had come to this ranch in the first place. Silas looked from Emma to Daniel. I see what this is, he said. A poor woman gets herself under the protection of a wealthy rancher, and suddenly she believes every document can be challenged. Daniel's face darkened, but Emma spoke first. No. Silas looked at her. Emma stepped closer to the table. I got myself under the protection of my father's good sense. Daniel did not find this paper. I did. Daniel's eyes shifted toward her, but he said nothing. Silas laughed once. Miss Whitaker, you are not a lawyer. No, I am better than that with ledgers. Eli coughed into his fist, hiding a grin. Emma unfolded another paper from the tin box. It was a small sheet of her own notes, written that morning after she read the documents. Her pencil marks were clean and exact. Your current loan to me began at $22 after my father died. I paid you regularly for 11 months. I missed one payment after a wrist injury, then another after winter orders failed. You added penalties. Some were written in the agreement, some were not. Then you used this old boundary note to threaten county action sooner than the loan terms allowed. Silas's color changed. You do not understand the terms. I understand numbers, I understand dates, and I understand that a man who has honest paper does not need to wave dead paper over a woman's porch. Daniel looked down, and for a moment Emma thought he might smile. Silas leaned forward. You are making accusations you cannot afford. Emma's hands had begun to tremble again, so she placed them flat on the table. Her father's letter lay near her wrist. I have been affording fear for 14 months, Mr. Ward. I am done paying for it. The words surprised even her. They came from somewhere deeper than anger. They came from lonely nights, empty feed bins, flour-stained hands, and the terrible moment at the Broken Star gate when she had nearly sold Mercy for less than a saddle. Silas looked at Daniel. Are you allowing this? Daniel's voice was calm. This is her matter. Then why are you standing there? Because it is my kitchen. Eli laughed outright this time. Silas snapped his gloves against his palm. You people may think this is amusing, but I can file papers before noon tomorrow. I can make her prove every claim in court. I can bury that little farm under costs before the first thaw. Emma felt the fear then. It rose cold in her stomach because she knew he could cause trouble even if he was wrong. Wrong men with money could still make honest people bleed time, fees, and sleep. Daniel must have seen it in her face. He took one careful step nearer, but he spoke to Emma, not Silas. "You have options," he said. "We can take the papers to Judge Alder this afternoon. We can ask for a county review. We can gather every receipt from your father's ledger and your own. Or, if you choose, I can ride with you to town and stand witness while you speak." Emma looked at him. "Not I will handle it. Not let me fix this. Options." She breathed in slowly. Silas watched them both, and something bitter twisted his mouth. "So that is how it is." Emma turned back to him. "No, this is how it is. You will write down the exact balance of my lawful loan without false fees tied to the boundary note. You will sign it. Then I will pay what I owe under the real terms." Silas gave a cold smile. "And if I refuse?" Emma picked up the claim release. "Then I will take this to Judge Alder with my father's letter, Daniel's witness, and every receipt I have. I will also ask the judge why you were trying to collect pressure on a settled note signed by your own father." That struck him. Not hard enough to defeat him, but hard enough to make him think. Silas Ward lived on reputation. He needed townsfolk to fear him, but he also needed them to believe his papers were clean. A lender with dirty records was a man whose power could crack. For a long moment he stood in silence. Then he took a pen from inside his coat. Daniel slid a clean sheet across the table. Silas looked at him with hate in his eyes. Daniel looked back as if hate were poor weather. Emma dictated the terms. Her voice did not shake now. Silas wrote the remaining lawful balance, $8, no old boundary fees, no additional filings as long as payments continued under the original agreement. Any future penalties had to be written, dated, and signed by both parties. When he finished, Emma read every word. Twice. Then she made him sign. Silas pushed the paper toward her. "You have made an enemy today." Emma folded the paper carefully. "No," she said, "I found out I already had one." The kitchen held its breath. Silas put on his hat and moved toward the door. Before leaving, he paused and looked back at Daniel. "Careful, Boone, some women bring trouble with them." Daniel's eyes went cold. "Trouble rode in with you, Ward." Silas left. The door shut behind him. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then Eli let out a long breath. "Well," he said, "that was better than breakfast." Emma almost laughed, but the strength went out of her too quickly. She reached for the chair and sat down before her legs could betray her. Daniel did not crowd her. He poured coffee into a cup and set it near her hand. "You stood well," he said. Emma stared at the folded agreement. "I was terrified." "I know." She looked up. He was not smiling. He was not praising her like she was a child who had behaved bravely. He was simply telling the truth. "That makes standing matter more," he said. Something in Emma's chest loosened. Outside, the snow had stopped. Through the window, she could see Mercy in the paddock, bright against the brown fence, his white mane lifting in the wind. Her father's letter lay open beside the tin box. Emma touched the edge of it. "He knew Silas might do this," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "Your father knew a great many things. He knew you would have the papers." "Yes." "And he knew I would come here." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "I think he hoped you would." Emma looked toward the yard. The broken star no longer seemed like a stranger's ranch. Not exactly. It still was not hers. But a piece of her father had been hidden inside it, waiting for her. A braid, a letter, a tin box, a promise that had taken 14 months to open. Daniel sat across from her, leaving the table between them. "I owe you another apology," he said. Emma looked at him. "For what?" "For keeping a drawer full of your father's trust and not knowing what was in it." She studied his face. He meant it. That was the trouble with Daniel Boone. When he was wrong, he did not decorate it. He set it down plain and waited for the weight to be measured. Emma wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. "You are not forgiven yet. I understand. But you are improving." His mouth softened. "I will take that as better than yesterday." "It is." Eli, who had been slowly backing toward the door, muttered, "That sounds like courtship if a man squints." Emma turned red. Daniel looked at him. "Eli, I am leaving." And he did, fast enough to be believable. Emma looked down at her cup, fighting a smile she had not meant to give. For the first time since her father died, the silence around her did not feel empty. It felt full of things waiting to be spoken carefully. By evening, she had finished sorting half the accounts. Daniel walked her to the paddock, where Mercy waited with fresh hay caught in his mane. The sky was turning rose over the Montana hills. Emma untied the reins, then paused. "I will come tomorrow," she said. Daniel's eyes held hers. "I hoped you would." She mounted Mercy and gathered the reins. Before she rode out, she looked back at the ranch house, at the warm windows, at the man standing in the yard with her father's leather braid once again around his wrist. Then she looked toward the road home. For the first time, it did not feel like she was riding away from safety. It felt like she was carrying a piece of it with her. If you believe truth can break a trap stronger than anger ever could, don't forget to like this story and stay with Emma, because Sela's ward is not finished yet. Sela's ward did not strike back the next day. That worried Emma more than if he had. Men like Sela's did not accept defeat with grace. They folded it neatly, placed it in a drawer, and waited for the best hour to bring it out again. Emma knew that because she had seen his eyes in Daniel's kitchen. He had not looked beaten when he left. He had looked measured. 3 days passed. The snow melted into brown mud along the road. The creek behind the broken star ran louder under its thin ice. Cattle gathered near the lower pasture fence, breathing steam into the cold mornings. Inside the ranch house, Emma put Daniel's accounts into order with a stern patience that frightened every receipt into its proper place. Eli called her the paper sheriff. She pretended not to like it. Daniel pretended not to notice she did. Each morning, Emma arrived earlier. Each evening, she stayed a little later. At first, she told herself it was because the work needed doing. The pantry still had to be set right, the winter provisions needed counting, and Daniel's ledgers had more foolishness buried inside them than any respectable ranch should allow. But work was not the only reason. The house had begun to change under her hands. The flour stayed dry. The coffee had one shelf. The stove was blackened and polished. The men stopped wandering into the kitchen like lost calves and began checking the meal board Emma had nailed near the door. Even Daniel, who had once believed a man could live on coffee, biscuits, and stubbornness, started washing his cup without being asked. Small things. Quiet things. Dangerous things, because they made a place feel less like work and more like belonging. Emma fought that feeling. She fought it when Daniel left kindling stacked near the stove before dawn because he had noticed her hands were stiff in the cold. She fought it when Mercy nickered happily every time they reached the broken star gate. She fought it when Daniel asked before sending feed to her farm, before moving her saddle, before adjusting any part of her day that touched her life. He was learning. That unsettled her most of all. A careless man could be refused. A proud man could be resisted. But a man who listened, changed, and remembered where the hurt had been placed was much harder to keep at a safe distance. On Friday afternoon, Emma found a new problem in the accounts. It was not one of Daniel's mistakes. She was sitting at the kitchen table with 3 ledgers open, her pencil tucked behind her ear, when a figure in the feed column caught her eye. She checked it once, then again. Then she pulled the supplier receipt closer and compared the mark at the bottom. Her hand went still. Daniel came in carrying his gloves. He stopped when he saw her face. "What did you find?" Emma did not look up. "Your winter feed order from October." "What about it?" "You paid full price for 30 sacks." "Yes." "You received 24. Daniel crossed the kitchen slowly. "Are you certain?" Emma turned the receipt toward him. "The receipt says 30, your stock count says 24, Eli's barn notes say 24, the delivery mark has been changed." Daniel leaned over the paper. His expression darkened. "Ward Freight delivered that order." Emma looked at him. "Sila's." "His cousin owns the freight line. Sila's handles the books when shipments run through Pine Hollow." Emma sat back. The room felt colder. At first she had thought Sila's was only leaning on her debt. Now his shadow stretched into Daniel's business too. Daniel picked up the receipt, then put it down again. "I missed this." "Yes." He looked at her. That was not a question. "No." For some reason, that pulled a small smile from him, but it faded quickly. If Ward's cousin shorted this ranch and Ward touched the books, he may have done it elsewhere. Emma's mind moved faster than her fear. How many ranches use Ward Freight? Most of the valley in winter. Then he may have been skimming from half the county while scaring the other half into silence. Daniel's jaw tightened. Outside, a wagon rolled into the yard. Eli opened the kitchen door a moment later, his face set in a way Emma had not seen before. "Boss," he said, "you need to come out." Daniel reached for his hat. Emma stood too. Eli looked at her, then back at Daniel. "You may both want to see it." They stepped outside into the sharp afternoon air. A buckboard stood near the barn. On it sat Mrs. Ruth Bellamy, the widow who owned a small place 2 miles west of Emma's farm. Her shoulders were wrapped in a faded shawl, and her face was pale from cold or worry, maybe both. Beside her sat her 12-year-old son, Will, holding a rope tied around 2 thin milk goats. Daniel approached first. "Mrs. Bellamy." Ruth tried to climb down, but Daniel offered his hand. She accepted it because pride had its limits when a woman was shaking. Emma moved closer. "Ruth, what happened?" Ruth looked at Emma with tired eyes. "Ward came this morning." Emma felt her stomach tighten. "What did he want?" "Said my late husband's account had hidden fees. Said if I could not pay by Monday, he would take the goats and file against the West Field." Will's face turned red, but he did not cry. That made Emma's heart hurt worse. Daniel's voice was low. "How much did he claim?" $17. Emma and Daniel looked at each other. Ruth pulled a folded paper from her shawl. "I heard what happened here. Folks are talking. I do not like asking, but I thought maybe you could look at it, Emma. You always were good with figures." Emma took the paper carefully. There it was again. Old fees. Loose wording. Threat of filing. A debt made heavier by fear. Emma read it twice, and anger moved through her like fire under a stove lid. "Ruth," she said, "did your husband ever sign anything about the Westfield boundary?" "No, his father did years ago, but we were told it was settled." Emma's eyes lifted to Daniel. Daniel's face had gone hard. "This is not just about Emma," he said. "No," Emma said, "it never was." Ruth looked between them. "Can he take the goats?" Emma looked at the boy holding the rope. One goat had a bell tied around its neck with a blue ribbon. The ribbon was worn, but someone had tied it in a neat bow. Will's fingers gripped the rope so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Emma remembered Mercy at the Broken Star Gate. She remembered the terrible weight of deciding what beloved thing could be sacrificed cheaply enough to save the rest. "No," she said. The word came out stronger than she expected. Ruth blinked. Emma folded the paper. "He can scare you, he can threaten you, but he cannot take what is not lawfully his, not if we gather the papers before he moves." "We," Ruth whispered. Emma looked at Daniel. He nodded once. "We," he said. By evening, the Broken Star kitchen had become something Daniel's ranch hands had never expected to see. A war room made of coffee, ledgers, old receipts, and angry widows. Ruth Bellamy sat beside Emma with her own papers spread out. Mrs. Pritchard from town arrived after supper with a biscuit tin full of receipts and a face like thunder. Then came Henry Lowe, a one-armed farmer who had been paying Ward for an old equipment note he could barely explain. Eli brought in chairs from the bunkhouse. Daniel kept coffee moving and said very little, though his eyes missed nothing. Emma read every paper. Daniel marked every name. By lamplight the pattern became clear. Silas had not stolen boldly. Bold theft got men shot or jailed. He had stolen softly through pressure, confusion, old notes, and small fees no desperate person had the time or courage to question. $1 here, $3 there, a threat before harvest, a filing warning before winter, enough to keep people bent, not enough to make them stand together. Until now. Mrs. Pritchard slapped one hand on the table. "My late brother paid this note twice." Henry Lowe leaned forward. "I sold my second mule because of that fee." Ruth's eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. "My boy has been watering down milk so we could keep those goats fed." The room went silent. Emma looked at the papers in front of her. This was bigger than her father's land, bigger than mercy, bigger than one afternoon at a ranch gate with $10 between pride and loss. Daniel stood near the stove, his sleeves rolled, his face grave. "What do you want to do?" he asked. He asked the room, but his eyes rested on Emma. Not because he expected her to carry it alone. Because he trusted her to name the truth. Emma looked at Ruth, at Will, at Henry, at Mrs. Pritchard, at the stack of papers that had kept good people afraid in separate houses. "We take it to Judge Alder," she said, "together, not one by one, together." Eli nodded. "That sounds like the paper sheriff talking." This time Emma did smile. Only a little. Daniel saw it. The room seemed warmer for it. Then a hard knock struck the front door. Every voice stopped. Daniel moved first, but Emma rose too. Eli went to the window and pulled the curtain back just enough to look outside. His face changed. "Boss," he said quietly, "it is not Ward." Daniel looked at him. "Who is it?" Eli let the curtain fall. "County Deputy." Emma's hand went to the back of the chair. Daniel opened the door. A young deputy stood on the porch, snow damp on his hat, a folded notice in his hand. His eyes moved over the crowded kitchen, then settled on Emma. "Miss Whitaker." "Yes." He held out the paper. "I am sorry, ma'am. Silas Ward filed an emergency claim this afternoon. This is notice for seizure review on your lower pasture and any movable property tied to the account." Emma did not take the paper at first. The room seemed to pull away from her. Movable property. Mercy. Daniel's voice came low and dangerous. "On what grounds?" The deputy swallowed. "Fraudulent non-payment and disputed collateral." Emma finally took the notice. Her fingers did not tremble now. They had gone cold. Outside, Mercy called from the paddock, bright and unaware in the darkening yard. Silas Ward had made his next move. And this time, he had reached for her horse again. For a moment, no one in the Broken Star kitchen moved. The deputy stood in the doorway with his hat in his hands, looking like a man who wished the paper had chosen someone else to carry it. Ruth Bellamy held her son close without seeming to know she had reached for him. Mrs. Pritchard's mouth pressed into a thin line. Eli's hands curled slowly at his sides. Emma stared at the notice. The words were plain, but they did not feel real at first. Emergency claim. Seizure review. Movable property tied to the account. Sila's ward had not come for the land first. He had come for mercy. Daniel stepped closer, but stopped before his shoulder brushed hers. Emma, he said softly. She read the notice again. There were no heavy threats written in red ink, no shouting, no cruelty on the page. That was how men like Sila's did their worst work. They turned fear into neat words and called it law. The deputy cleared his throat. Miss Whitaker, the review is set for tomorrow morning before Judge Alder. Until then, Mr. Ward has requested that disputed collateral not be moved from the county. Emma looked up at him. Mercy is not collateral. The young deputy swallowed. That is for the judge to decide, ma'am. No, Emma said, and her voice steadied with each word. It was decided the day my father bought him with clean money and put his name in our farm ledger. Daniel's eyes shifted to her. The ledger, he said. Emma turned toward him. My father recorded everything. She moved quickly then, faster than fear could catch her. She folded the notice, tucked it into her coat, and reached for her gloves. Daniel picked up his hat. I will ride with you. Emma stopped. The old part of her, the proud part that had survived 14 months on silence and stubborn bread money, almost said no. Then she looked at the table. Ruth's paper, Henry's receipts, Mrs. Pritchard's biscuit tin, her father's letter. The truth had not come from one person standing alone. It had come because one kitchen had filled with people who were tired of being afraid separately. She looked back at Daniel. Yes, she said, ride with me. He nodded once and something passed between them. Not romance, not yet, something stronger in that hour. Respect, tested and chosen. They left the kitchen together. Outside, the night had settled over the ranch yard. The cold bit through Emma's gloves. Lantern light spilled from the barn in long gold strips, catching on Mercy's white coat as he stood at the paddock fence. He lifted his head when he saw her, ears forward, calm as if he had been waiting for her to explain the trouble. Emma walked to him and pressed both hands to his face. I am not letting him take you, she whispered. Mercy breathed warm against her palms. Daniel stood a few steps back, giving her the private moment he had once been too afraid to enter. That too, she noticed. Eli came from the barn with 2 saddled horses. I figured, he said. Daniel took the reins. Thank you. Eli looked at Emma. You want me along? Emma thought of Sila's. She thought of the deputy's notice. She thought of tomorrow morning and the way one woman's word could be made to sound small in a room full of men. Yes, she said, but not to fight. Eli looked almost insulted. I can stand quiet when needed. Mrs. Pritchard called from the doorway, No, you cannot. Eli pointed toward her without looking back. I can try. Despite everything, a soft laugh moved through the porch behind them. It did not last long, but it loosened the fear enough for people to breathe again. Emma mounted Mercy. Daniel swung onto his dark bay. Eli followed on an old roan with one sleepy eye and a bad opinion of cold weather. They rode first to Emma's farm. The road between Broken Star and the Whitaker place lay pale under moonlight. Snow clung to the ditches. Fence posts passed like dark markers beside them. Emma had ridden that road alone so many times that she knew every bend by memory, but tonight it felt different. Tonight, hoofbeats followed hers. Her farmhouse appeared at the end of the lane, small and quiet with no lantern burning in the window. She hated that. She had left in daylight and had not known the world would change before supper. Inside, the house was bitter cold. Daniel lit the lamp while Emma went straight to the desk where her father's ledger waited under a folded cloth. Her fingers moved across the cover before opening it, almost like touching his hand. Please, she whispered. though she did not know if she was speaking to God, her father, or the paper itself. She turned pages carefully. Seed purchases. Fence nails. Winter flower. Mercy shoeing paid fare. She kept turning. Then she found it. 6 years earlier, written in her father's slanted hand. White gelding purchased from Amos Reed, $32 cash. Name given by Emma, Mercy, belongs to Emma Whitaker. Her breath caught. Belongs to Emma Whitaker. Daniel leaned over the table just enough to read it. There, he said quietly. Emma pressed her fingers to the line. Her father had written many practical things in his life, but this one line felt like a blessing, a shield, and a farewell all at once. Eli removed his hat. I would say that settles it. Daniel's voice stayed careful. It helps, we need more. Emma looked up. What more? If Ward claims the horse was tied to the debt, we prove the loan was separate. We need the original loan paper, your payment receipts, and anything showing Mercy was never listed. Emma turned to the cedar chest beside the wall. My receipts are there. She knelt and opened the chest. The smell of cedar and old cloth rose up, and for one sharp moment she was a girl again, watching her mother fold blankets with lavender tucked between them. Beneath the blankets lay a small tin of receipts, tied in ribbon. She carried it to the table. Daniel did not touch it until she handed it to him. Together they sorted the proof. The loan paper named land tax, feed bill, and roof repair. It did not name Mercy. The receipts showed steady payment. Her father's ledger showed ownership. The old claim release proved Sila's had used false pressure. Piece by piece, the trap began to show its shape. Not just fear. Fraud. Eli stood near the stove, his face grim. He wanted her scared enough to hand over the horse without making him take it legal. Daniel nodded. Then when she did not sell, he tried to make a paper trail. Emma looked at Mercy through the dark window. He stood tied near the post, the moon making him shine faintly like a ghost of every good thing she was about to lose and had not lost yet. Her voice was quiet. He knew Mercy was worth more than the balance. Daniel looked at her. Yes. And he knew I loved him. No one answered. They did not need to. Emma gathered the papers and wrapped them in cloth. Then she went to her bedroom and pulled open the small drawer beside her bed. Beneath her mother's ribbon lay one more item. A photograph. Her father stood beside Mercy 2 summers before he died, one hand on the horse's neck, the other resting on Emma's shoulder. Emma in the photograph was smiling with the careless ease of someone who had not yet learned how much life could take. On the back in her father's hand were 4 words. Emma and her Mercy. She held the photograph to her chest and closed her eyes. When she returned to the kitchen, Daniel was standing by the stove, warming his hands. His face softened when he saw the photograph, but he did not ask. He waited until she placed it on the table. Then he read the back. His jaw tightened. He really did not waste words, Daniel said. Emma looked at him. No, she whispered, he did not. They rode back to Broken Star after midnight. The house was still awake. Ruth, Mrs. Pritchard, Henry Lowe, and Will had not left. More neighbors had come too, quiet men and women with folded papers in their hands and worry in their eyes. The kitchen glowed with lamplight. Coffee steamed. The table had been cleared for Emma's documents as if everyone understood whose fight would be heard first. When Emma entered, the room turned toward her. She had spent more than a year feeling invisible. Now every eye waited for her, not with pity but with belief. Mrs. Pritchard stood. We are coming tomorrow. Emma blinked. To court. To the review, Ruth said. Ward used the same tricks on us. If he is going to claim one of us is confused, he can say it to all of us. Henry Lowe lifted his receipts. I want the judge to see mine too. Eli leaned near the stove and nodded toward Emma. Paper Sheriff has a posse now. This time no one corrected him. Daniel watched Emma from across the room. She could see the question in his eyes, not will you let them, not can you handle this, only one quiet question. Is this what you choose? Emma looked around the kitchen, at Ruth's tired face, at Will's brave silence, at Mrs. Pritchard's anger, at Henry's worn hands, at Daniel who had finally learned that help had to be offered with room for her answer. Then she nodded. We go together. The next morning, Pine Hollow woke under a white sky. By 8 o'clock, wagons lined the road outside the courthouse. Word had spread before breakfast. Men came from ranches. Women came from farms. Merchants stood in doorways pretending not to watch while watching everything. Silas Ward arrived in a black coat with his cousin beside him and a leather folder under one arm. He looked pleased. Then he saw the crowd behind Emma. The pleasure faded. Emma stood at the bottom of the courthouse steps with Mercy tied near the rail behind her. She had chosen to bring him, not hide him. He stood brushed and proud, white coat bright against the muddy street, her father's ledger proof wrapped safely in Emma's arms. Daniel stood on one side of her. Ruth stood on the other. Eli stood behind them, trying very hard to look like a man who could stand quiet. Judge Alder called them inside. The courtroom was small, cold, and crowded enough that people stood along the walls. Emma sat at the front table with her papers. Daniel sat behind her, not beside her. That was his choice, and she understood it. This had to be her voice first. Silas spoke smoothly. He told the judge Emma had failed to meet obligations. He claimed the loan was tied to farm property and working assets. He called Mercy valuable movable property associated with the farm operation. Emma's hands tightened under the table. Working asset. Not Mercy. Not her father's gift. Not the horse who had carried her grief. When Silas finished, Judge Alder turned to Emma. Miss Whitaker, do you have a response? Emma stood. For one breath, fear closed around her throat. Then Mercy called from outside. The sound reached through the courthouse window, clear and familiar. Emma opened her papers. Yes, Your Honor, she said, I have the truth in writing. Silas shifted in his chair. Emma placed her father's ledger on the table. And as she opened it to the line that said Mercy belonged to her, the courthouse door creaked open behind them. A man stepped inside, bent with age, wrapped in a buffalo coat, leaning heavily on a cane. Daniel rose halfway from his seat. Emma turned. She did not know the old man. But Silas Ward did. His face went white. The old man removed his hat and looked straight at the judge. My name is Amos Reed, he said, and I sold that horse to James Whitaker. I can tell this court exactly who he bought it for. The courtroom went so quiet Emma could hear the old man's cane tap once against the floor. Amos Reed stood just inside the door, bent by age but not broken by it. Snow dusted the shoulders of his buffalo coat. His white beard had been trimmed with a careful hand, and though his body leaned hard on the cane, his eyes were clear. Clear enough to make Silas Ward look away. Judge Alder peered over his spectacles. Mr. Reed, he said, this is a formal review. If you have testimony, step forward. Amos took 3 slow steps. Daniel moved as if to help him, but the old man lifted one hand. I can make it to the truth on my own feet, Amos said. A murmur moved through the room. Emma stood frozen beside the table, one hand resting on her father's ledger. She had never met Amos Reed, but she knew his name. Her father had written it beside the line that had just become the center of her whole life. White gelding purchased from Amos Reed, $32 cash. Name given by Emma, Mercy, belongs to Emma Whitaker. Amos reached the witness chair and lowered himself into it with a slow breath. The judge asked him the necessary questions, and Amos answered each one simply. Yes, he was Amos Reed. Yes, he once traded horses outside Pine Hollow. Yes, he had sold a white gelding to James Whitaker 6 years earlier. Then Judge Alder leaned forward. And who was the horse purchased for? Amos looked at Emma. For one strange moment, his face softened as if he were not seeing the woman in front of him, but the girl she had been. For her, he said, James brought his daughter with him. Little thing then, hair in a braid, eyes too big for her face. She named that horse before the money changed hands. A few people turned toward Emma. Her cheeks warmed, but she did not look down. Selah stood. Your Honor, memory after 6 years can be uncertain. Amos looked at him. My back is old, my knees are old, my memory is not yours to bury. A low sound moved through the room, half surprise, half approval. Judge Alder struck his small gavel once. Order. Selah smoothed the front of his black coat. I only mean that no bill of sale has been presented. A ledger line is not the same as county registration. Emma's stomach tightened. Daniel's eyes shifted toward Amos, but he stayed seated. Ruth Bellamy reached over and touched Emma's sleeve for half a second, just enough to steady her. Amos placed a weathered leather pouch on the table. I brought my sale book. Selah's went still. The old man untied the pouch with stiff fingers and pulled out a narrow book bound in cracked brown leather. He opened it slowly, licking one finger and turning pages with the care of a preacher handling scripture. There, he said. The bailiff carried the book to the judge. Judge Alder read the entry. His expression changed. White gelding, star mark hidden beneath forelock, left hind sock sold to James Whitaker, $32 cash, the judge read aloud. Gift for daughter Emma Whitaker. No lien, no note, no claim retained. Emma closed her eyes. For a moment, she was not in the courtroom. She was back in that sunlit yard years ago, her father laughing as Mercy pushed his nose into her pocket looking for sugar. She had not understood then that love could be written down as proof. Her father had known. He had always known. Selah's voice cut through the room. That proves ownership before the loan. It does not prove the horse was excluded from later farm obligations. Emma opened her eyes. The fear that had followed her for 14 months rose one last time, but this time it found no empty place to settle. Behind her stood half the valley. In front of her lay the ledger. Beside the judge sat Amos Reed's sale book. And somewhere outside, Mercy waited under a gray Montana sky, not as collateral, not as property for a greedy man to twist, but as the living proof of her father's care. Emma stood straighter. Your Honor, she said. Judge Alder looked at her. Go ahead, Miss Whitaker. Emma lifted the loan paper. This is the agreement I signed with Mr. Ward after my father's death. It lists the purposes of the loan: property tax, roof repair, and feed bill. It does not name Mercy. It does not name livestock. It does not name movable property. Selah stepped forward. Farm operations include working animals. Emma turned to him. He was never your working animal to include. Her voice was not loud, but it carried. Mercy belonged to me before that loan. My father's ledger says so. Mr. Reed's sale book says so. The photograph I have says so. And you knew it because you tried to make me sell him quietly before you tried to take him loudly. The room stirred. Judge Alder's eyes narrowed. Explain that last statement. Emma took out the folded notice Selah's had given her before the payment deadline and placed it beside the other papers. For months, Mr. Ward spoke of old boundary claims and extra county filings. He made me believe my father's land was weaker than it was. He came to my porch and pressed me to pay before sundown. I was short. He knew I had nothing left worth money except Mercy. Selah scoffed. I do not control what desperate people choose to sell. No, Emma said, but you worked hard to make me desperate. A hush settled over the room. Emma's hands trembled, but she did not hide them. I rode to the Broken Star Ranch to sell Mercy for $10. not because that was his worth but because it was what I needed. Daniel Boone refused to buy him. He gave me work instead. That is why I am here with proof instead of standing in an empty paddock." Daniel lowered his eyes for a moment. Not from shame. From feeling. Judge Alder looked at Silas. "Mr. Ward, did you present the old boundary matter as unsettled?" Silas's face tightened. There were questions around the lower pasture. Emma placed the claim release on the judge's desk. "No, there were answers paid in full, recorded, signed by your father." Judge Alder read the paper, and the room seemed to lean toward him. When he looked up again, his voice had changed. "Mr. Ward, this court will not approve seizure of an animal privately owned before the loan and not named as collateral. The emergency claim is denied." Emma's breath left her so suddenly she had to grip the table. But the judge was not finished. "In addition," he said, "given the documents presented today, I am ordering a review of your lending records involving old boundary notes, late penalties, and any filings against properties in this county." Silas went pale. "Your Honor, that is unnecessary." Judge Alder's eyes hardened. "It appears very necessary." A murmur rose, stronger this time. Ruth Bellamy began to cry softly, her son Will pressed against her side. Henry Lowe gripped his hat until the brim bent. Mrs. Pritchard nodded once, fierce and satisfied. Silas gathered his folder with stiff hands. "This is a mistake." Amos Reed leaned on his cane. "No, son, this is a bill coming due." The words landed like a hammer. Judge Alder dismissed the review and ordered Silas to remain available for further hearing. The room began to move all at once. People stood, whispered, touched Emma's shoulder as they passed. Some thanked her. Some could not speak, but their eyes said enough. Emma stayed at the table, staring at her father's ledger. It was over. No, not over. But Mercy was safe. Her land had a chance. And Silas Ward, for the first time in years, was the one who would have to explain his papers. Daniel came to stand beside her, leaving a respectful space between them. "You did it," he said. Emma shook her head. "We did." He looked at her then, and the quiet between them held more than gratitude. It held all the things that had been growing since the day she rode to his gate with dust on her hem and heartbreak in her hands. Outside the courthouse, the whole town seemed to be waiting. Mercy lifted his head when Emma stepped onto the porch. He gave a soft call, and she crossed the street faster than she meant to. She wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face against his mane. This time she did not care who saw her cry. The tears were not shame. They were release. Daniel stood by the courthouse steps. He watched her, but he did not come closer until she looked back and nodded. Then he walked over. Amos Reed followed slowly behind him, leaning on his cane. Emma wiped her face and turned to the old horse trader. "I do not know how to thank you," she said. Amos looked at Mercy. "Thank your father. He paid fair and asked me to write clear, said clear paper saves trouble later." Emma laughed through the last of her tears. "That sounds like him." Amos reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small piece of folded cloth. "He gave me something that day," he said. "Told me if I ever heard that horse was in dispute I should bring it." Emma unfolded the cloth. Inside was a tiny brass nameplate, scratched but readable. "Mercy." Her father must have meant to fasten it to the stall door and never had. Emma held it like treasure. Daniel looked at the nameplate, then at her. "Your father built a long road for the truth," he said. Emma closed her fingers around the brass. "And I nearly did not follow it." "You followed it when it mattered." She looked at him in the muddy street with townsfolk moving around them and Mercy breathing warm at her shoulder. Daniel's hat was dusted with snow. His coat was plain. The leather braid rested around his wrist, carrying a promise that had finally begun to make sense. For the first time, Emma did not feel anger when she saw it. She felt the ache of something unfinished. Behind them, the courthouse doors opened. Silas Ward stepped out between the deputy and his cousin. His face was tight with humiliation, but his eyes were still sharp. They found Emma, then Daniel, then Mercy. "This is not finished," he said. Daniel's shoulders squared, but Emma touched his sleeve before he could speak. She faced Silas herself. "Yes, it is," she said. "The part where I fear you is finished." The street went still. Silas said nothing. Maybe because too many people were watching. Maybe because the truth, once spoken in public, had taken the shape of a fence he could not cross. He turned and walked away. Emma watched until he disappeared behind the corner of the lending office. Only then did her hand fall from Daniel's sleeve. She realized she had touched him without thinking. Daniel realized it too. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Eli appeared beside them, grinning. "I stood quiet in court," he said. Mrs. Pritchard, passing behind him, said, "Barely." Eli pointed at her. "Barely still counts." Laughter moved through the crowd, gentle and relieved. Emma smiled, really smiled this time, and Daniel saw it. The look on his face made her turn away before her heart could move too quickly. That afternoon, the group returned to the Broken Star. Not because anyone asked, but because everyone seemed to understand that the kitchen had become the place where fear was sorted into piles and truth was given coffee. Ruth brought bread, Mrs. Pritchard brought jam, Henry Lowe brought his old receipts. Amos Reed came too, and Eli gave him the best chair by the stove. Emma fastened the brass nameplate to Mercy's stall before supper. She stood back and looked at it. "Mercy." The letters caught the lantern light. Daniel came into the barn quietly. "It suits him," he said. Emma nodded. "My father named nothing by accident." "No," Daniel said, "I am beginning to understand that." She looked at him. The barn smelled of hay, leather, and winter damp. Outside, the house windows glowed gold. Inside, Mercy shifted in his stall, calm as if all danger had passed and only stubborn humans needed time to admit what horses already knew. Emma drew in a breath. "I was wrong about one thing," she said. Daniel's eyes held hers. "What thing?" "I thought my father sent me to your gate because he trusted you with Mercy." Daniel waited. Emma touched the brass nameplate softly. "I think he sent me because he trusted you to help me find my own strength again." Daniel's face changed, quiet and deep. "I almost failed him." "But you did not." "I came close." Emma looked at the leather braid on his wrist. "Yes," she said, "you did." The answer was honest, and somehow it did not wound the way it once would have. Daniel looked down at the straw-covered floor. "I will spend a long time making peace with that." Emma's voice softened. "Then spend it doing better." He looked up. "I can do that." She believed him. That was the dangerous part. If this truth touched your heart, tell me in the comments whether Emma should trust Daniel fully now, because the hardest part of healing is not winning in court. It is deciding who gets to stand beside you afterward. Later that night, after the neighbors had gone and the kitchen had been put back in order, Emma gathered her shawl to ride home. Daniel walked her to the porch. The moon was high, the yard shone silver. Mercy waited saddled near the rail, his new stall nameplate still fresh in Emma's mind. Daniel held the reins, but he did not hand them over at once. "There is something I need to ask," he said. Emma's heart gave a small, foolish jump. "Yes." He glanced toward the dark road leading to her farm. "The snow will be heavier by morning. The east bedroom here is empty. You can stay the night if you choose, no terms changed. No meaning forced, just warmth and a shorter ride." Emma studied him. There it was again. Help with space inside it. A choice instead of a decision made for her. She looked toward the road. then toward Mercy, then back at the warm light in the broken star windows. Her pride rose, but it no longer sounded like wisdom. It sounded tired. "All right," she said, "for tonight." Daniel nodded, but the relief in his eyes was impossible to hide. Emma stepped inside the house, carrying her father's ledger beneath her arm. Behind her, Daniel led Mercy back to the barn. And from the edge of the yard, unseen beside the shadow of the tool shed, a figure watched the warm windows of the broken star house before slipping quietly into the dark. Emma did not sleep easily in the east bedroom. The room was warm, cleaner than she expected, and plain in a way that made it feel honest. A narrow bed stood against one wall. A small washstand sat beneath the window. Someone had placed a folded quilt at the foot of the bed, blue and cream, worn soft from years of use. It smelled faintly of cedar and sun. The broken star was quiet around her, but not empty. That was what kept her awake. At her own farmhouse, silence had always pressed down on her. It filled the corners and sat across the table like grief. Here, silence had footsteps inside it. A floorboard creaked once in the hall. Wind leaned against the windows. Horses shifted in the barn. Somewhere below, Daniel closed the stove door with a careful hand, trying not to make noise. Emma lay staring at the dark ceiling, her father's ledger on the chair beside her bed. Mercy was safe. Sela's had been exposed. The judge had ordered a review. Neighbors had stood together. By all rights, her heart should have rested. Instead, it kept returning to the shadow she had felt at the edge of the yard when she stepped inside. She had not seen anyone clearly, only a shape near the tool shed, gone before she could be sure it had been there at all. She told herself it was nothing. Then Mercy called from the barn. Not a soft greeting, not a sleepy sound. A sharp warning cry. Emma sat up at once. For one breath she listened. Then came a crash from outside. She was out of bed before fear had a name. She grabbed her shawl, took the lantern from the washstand, and opened the bedroom door. Daniel was already in the hall, pulling on his coat, his face hard with alarm. "You heard it?" he asked. "Mercy." They ran downstairs together. Eli came from the bunkroom half-dressed, boots unlaced, holding a lantern in one hand and a hammer in the other. "What happened?" Daniel opened the front door. Cold air burst into the house. From the barn came the wild sound of horses stamping and boards rattling. Smoke drifted thin and gray across the yard. Emma's heart stopped. "No." She ran. Daniel was beside her in an instant. Eli shouted for the men. The yard erupted with movement, lanterns flaring, boots striking frozen ground, voices calling through the dark. The barn door stood partly open. Inside, a small fire had caught in a pile of loose straw near the feed room. Flames licked upward, not yet large but hungry. One lantern lay broken on the floor, oil shining dark beneath it. Horses pulled against their halters, eyes rolling white in the smoky light. Mercy was in his stall, striking the door with one front hoof. Emma rushed toward him. Daniel caught her arm. "Wait." She turned on him, furious. "He is in there. And I am not letting you run into fire blind." The words were sharp, but his hand released her as soon as he saw her face. He pointed to Eli. "Water line now." Then to the younger hands, stumbling in behind them. "Open the back doors, move the horses out one by one, keep them covered." Emma snatched a wet grain sack from a barrel and wrapped it over her mouth. She did not wait for permission. This time Daniel did not stop her. He grabbed another sack and went with her. Together they reached Mercy's stall. The white horse tossed his head, frightened but listening. Emma slid the bolt with shaking hands. "Easy boy, easy, I am here." Mercy pressed forward. Smoke stung Emma's eyes. Daniel stepped between Mercy and the flames, using his coat to block the horse's view while Emma took the lead rope. "That's it," Daniel said low. "Walk him out." Emma led Mercy through the smoke, one hand on his neck, whispering his name again and again. A burning piece of straw snapped near her boot. Daniel stamped it out. Eli and the men threw water hard against the feed room wall. Steam rose in angry clouds. By the time Emma got Mercy into the yard, her lungs burned and her face was wet with tears she had not felt falling. She turned back. Daniel was still inside. Daniel! For one terrible moment, the smoke swallowed the doorway. Then he came out carrying the brass nameplate from Mercy's stall in one gloved hand. Behind him, Eli and the men beat down the last of the flames. The fire had not taken the barn, but it had tried. Emma held Mercy's lead rope so tightly her fingers hurt. Daniel walked toward her, coughing once. His coat sleeve was scorched. Soot marked his cheek. He held out the brass nameplate. "It fell," he said. Emma stared at it, then at him. Her anger, fear, relief, and something far more dangerous all rose together until she could not separate them. "You went back for that." His eyes held hers. "It mattered to you." She wanted to scold him. She wanted to thank him. She wanted to press her face against his chest and never admit she had wanted to. Instead, she took the nameplate. Eli came from the barn, coughing and waving smoke away. "Fire is out, feed rooms damaged, but the structure held." Daniel turned. "The horses." "All out, shaken, not hurt." Emma sagged against Mercy's neck. Then one of the younger hands called from behind the barn. "Boss, you need to see this." They followed him to the side wall near the tool shed. There, in the snow-soft mud, were fresh boot prints leading from the back of the barn toward the dark lane. Beside them lay a torn strip of black coat cloth caught on a nail. Daniel crouched and lifted it. Emma knew before anyone said the name. "Silas Ward." Eli's voice was low. "He came after the horse." "No," Daniel said, looking toward the feed room. "He came after the proof, too." Emma turned cold. The feed room shared a wall with the tax shelf where Daniel had kept the box of copied documents earlier that evening before Emma moved them into the kitchen. If the papers had still been there, the fire could have swallowed them. Daniel looked at her. "Your father's ledger." "In my room." "The claim release." "Kitchen table." Eli let out a breath. Then Ward burned straw and found nothing. Emma looked toward the dark road. The fear she thought had ended at the courthouse changed shape. Silas was no longer hiding behind paper. That made him weaker but also more dangerous. Daniel stood. "I am riding to town." Emma grabbed his sleeve. "Not alone." He looked at her hand, then at her face. For a moment she remembered the street outside the courthouse, the first time she had touched him without thinking. This time she did not let go. "You told me I have options," she said. "So do you. We wake the deputy, take the cloth, show the tracks, and bring Eli. We do not give Silas the chance to say you came angry in the dark." Daniel's jaw worked. Then he nodded. "You are right." Eli lifted the hammer still in his hand. "I am very official with this." Emma looked at him. "You are leaving that here." He sighed. "Paper sheriff has rules." Within the hour, Daniel, Eli, and two hands rode toward Pine Hollow with the torn cloth wrapped in a clean rag. Emma stayed at the ranch because Mercy was shaking and the men needed someone steady with the horses. She hated staying. She hated the waiting more. Mrs. Pritchard and Ruth arrived before dawn, having seen riders pass and heard enough to worry. By sunrise, the kitchen was full again, but this time no one spoke loudly. The fire had changed the air. Daniel returned mid-morning. Emma was on the porch when he rode in. One look at his face told her something had happened. "Silas?" she asked. "Gone." The word struck harder than she expected. Daniel dismounted. "His office is empty, cash drawer cleared, some records burned in the stove." Deputy found his cousin at the freight yard, claims he knows nothing but his horse is missing too. Emma looked toward town, though it could not be seen from the ranch. So he ran. For now. Eli rode up behind Daniel. Judge Alder issued notice to every crossing and stage stop. Ward will have trouble getting far with half the county mad and the other half looking at his books. That should have comforted Emma. It did not. Daniel saw it. He cannot take mercy, he said. I know. He cannot take your land. I know. But knowing did not quiet the part of her that had stood in smoke and heard her horse cry out. Daniel stepped closer. Emma. Her name in his voice was nearly her undoing. She turned away and walked to the porch rail. The yard was bright now, cruelly bright, as if daylight did not care what night had tried to do. Mercy stood in the paddock with a blanket over his back, tired but safe. The barn wall was blackened near the feed room. Men moved quietly with buckets and tools. Daniel stood beside her, not touching. I have spent months thinking a home was something a person kept by holding tight, Emma said. Land, ledger, horse, roof, papers. Daniel listened. But last night, when Mercy cried out, all I could think was that I could lose everything even after doing right. Her voice broke on the last word. Daniel's hand moved, then stopped at his side. May I? He asked quietly. She looked at him. The question was simple. It held everything he had learned. Emma nodded. Daniel took her hand. Not tightly, not claiming, just warm and steady around her cold fingers. You should not have had to fight alone, he said. I am tired of hearing what should have happened. I know. His thumb brushed once over her knuckles. Then hear what will happen. You will decide your life. Your land stays yours. Mercy stays yours. Your work stays respected. And if you let me, I will stand beside you without stepping in front of you. Emma looked down at their joined hands. For months, she had feared needing anyone would make her smaller. But standing there beside Daniel with smoke still in the air and truth still unfinished, she did not feel smaller. She felt less alone. Ruth called from the doorway, pretending not to see their hands and failing badly. Emma, Judge Alder is here. Emma and Daniel turned. A wagon had stopped at the gate. Judge Alder climbed down, followed by the deputy who carried a sealed packet. The judge removed his hat as he approached. Miss Whitaker, he said, we found something in Ward's office before the stove took the rest. He handed her the packet. Emma broke the seal. Inside was a page from Silas Ward's private ledger. Her name was written near the top. Beside it were 3 words that made the whole porch go silent. Pressure sale planned. Below that, in smaller writing, was another note. White horse to be acquired through Boone if possible. Emma slowly lifted her eyes to Daniel. Daniel's face had gone pale. Because the note meant Silas had not only planned to take Mercy. He had expected Daniel to help him do it. For a long moment, no one on the porch spoke. The page from Silas Ward's private ledger rested in Emma's hands, but it felt heavier than any book her father had ever owned. The words stared back in hard black ink. White horse to be acquired through Boone if possible. Emma read the line once, then again, then a third time, hoping the meaning would change. It did not. Daniel stood beside her, his face pale beneath the soot still smudged along his jaw from the barn fire. His hand had gone still around hers, not pulling away, not tightening, only frozen by the shock of seeing his name inside Silas Ward's plan. Judge Alder watched them both with the grave patience of a man who had delivered bad news before, and knew silence was part of it. Emma slowly turned to Daniel. Did he speak to you? She asked. Daniel's eyes met hers at once. Yes. The word moved through the porch like a cold wind. Ruth Bellamy drew in a small breath behind them. Eli straightened near the steps. Mrs. Pritchard, who had come out with a towel still in her hands, looked ready to march to Pine Hollow and drag Silas back herself. Emma did not move. When? She asked. Daniel swallowed. 2 days before you came to my gate. The world seemed to narrow to the space between them. Daniel's voice was low but clear. Ward came by the south pasture, said you were behind. Said Mercy was too fine an animal to be wasted on a failing farm. He asked if I would buy the horse if the chance came. Emma's fingers tightened around the paper. And what did you say? I told him a man who calls a woman's home a failing farm does not know the woman or the farm. Emma's face did not change. Daniel went on. He said you would come to your senses. He said if I was smart, I could get the horse cheap before some rougher buyer took him. I told him to leave my land. Eli's mouth pressed shut, as if holding back words that would not improve the moment. Daniel looked down at the porch boards, then back at Emma. I should have told you. The sentence landed softly, but it carried the weight of every mistake he had already admitted. The braid, the letter, the drawer, the promise kept too quietly. Again, he had known something and held it back because he thought silence would spare her. Emma stepped away from him. His hand fell empty at his side. The morning was bright now, too bright for such a conversation. Sunlight spread across the damaged barn wall, the muddy yard, Mercy's white coat, the faces of neighbors who had come to help and now stood caught inside a truth that belonged mostly to two people. Emma folded Silas's ledger page with careful hands. Why did you not tell me? She asked. Daniel's answer did not come quickly. This time she waited. At first, he said, because I thought refusing him was enough. Then you came to my gate with Mercy and I understood he had pressed you exactly where he said he would. His voice roughened. I was ashamed I had not warned you. After that, every hour made telling you harder. Emma looked at him, and pain moved behind her eyes. You keep deciding which truths I can bear. Daniel flinched. Not from anger. From accuracy. Judge Alder quietly stepped back toward the yard, giving them what privacy he could. Ruth led Will inside. Mrs. Pritchard took Eli by the sleeve and pulled him after her, though Eli looked like he would rather face a wild bull than leave at that moment. Soon only Emma and Daniel stood on the porch. Mercy grazed near the paddock fence, his blanket shifting in the wind. The brass nameplate had not yet been fastened back to his stall. It lay on the porch rail, scratched from the night before but still readable. Mercy. Emma picked it up and held it in her palm. My father trusted you, she said. Daniel's voice was quiet. I know. He trusted you to treat Mercy right, to keep his papers safe, to help me if trouble came. She looked at him then, but I think he trusted you with one more thing. Daniel did not speak. He trusted you to tell me the truth. The words struck him harder than accusation would have. Daniel removed his hat. I failed that part. Yes, Emma said, you did. Wind moved across the porch, lifting the edge of her shawl. Inside the house, low voices murmured and then faded. Somewhere beyond the yard, a hammer struck wood as one of the ranch hands started repairing the barn. Daniel looked older than he had yesterday. I cannot undo it, he said. No. I cannot make myself into a man who always knew how to speak before acting. No. But I can become one who does not hide behind good intentions anymore. His eyes held hers. I love you, Emma. That is not an excuse. It is the reason I am telling you plain now. I love you, and I have been afraid that every truth I kept too long would cost me the right to stand near you. Emma's throat tightened. He had said the words simply, no grand speech, no dramatic promise, just truth standing bare in the cold morning. For a heartbeat, she wanted to run from it. Not because she did not feel something for him. Because she did. That was what frightened her most. Love after loneliness did not arrive like a song. It arrived like a door opening in a house you had spent years locking. It let in warmth but also wind. It asked whether you were willing to be seen again. Emma looked at the nameplate in her hand. Her father had left her many things: land, a horse, ledgers, a stubborn heart, but maybe his last gift had not been Daniel Boone. Maybe it had been the chance to choose for herself. "I care for you," she said. Daniel's breath caught, but he did not move. "I think I have cared longer than I wanted to admit, but caring is not the same as trusting." "I know. And trust cannot be built on rescue." "No," he said, "it cannot. It has to be built on respect, on asking, on hard truths spoken before they become wounds." Daniel nodded. "Yes." Emma stepped closer, not enough to soften everything, but enough that he could see she was not leaving. "If there is one more truth you have kept from me, Daniel Boone, tell it now." He held her gaze. "There is one." Emma went still. Daniel reached into his coat pocket and drew out a folded paper, worn from being carried. He held it toward her. "This is the letter your father wrote to me, the part addressed to me." Emma did not take it at first. "What does it say?" "That I was not to make decisions for you, that if I helped I was to offer fair work, clear terms, and room for your pride." His mouth tightened with regret. "He knew my failing before I did." Emma took the letter. Her father's handwriting filled the page. She read slowly. "Daniel, if my daughter ever comes to your gate with mercy, understand this. She is not there to be saved. She will never forgive being handled like a problem. Offer her work if you have it. Offer her terms she can stand on. Tell her the truth even if her chin goes up and her eyes turn sharp, especially then. She has carried more than I wanted for her. Do not make her carry silence too. If you care for her, prove it by respecting the woman she already is. James Whitaker." Emma held the letter until the words blurred. Do not make her carry silence too. Her father had known. He had known Daniel's goodness. He had known his weakness. He had known Emma's pride. And somehow, even dying, he had tried to leave instructions strong enough to guide them both through the mistakes grief would make. A tear slid down Emma's cheek. Daniel did not reach to wipe it away. He waited. That was how she knew he had learned something. Emma folded the letter and pressed it against her heart. "You should have given me this sooner." "Yes." "You should have trusted me with all of it." "Yes." She looked up at him. "But you gave it to me now." Daniel's eyes were steady and sad. "I am late, I know that." Emma breathed out slowly. "My father used to say late truth is still better than a polished lie." A faint, painful smile touched Daniel's face. "He told me that too." For the first time that morning, Emma's own mouth softened. Of course he had. Behind them, the kitchen door opened a crack. Eli's voice came through, careful and not careful at all. "Are we still pretending not to listen?" Mrs. Pritchard snapped. "Eli." "What?" I whispered. Emma closed her eyes for 1 second, then laughed. It came out broken at first, half tears and half relief, but it was real. Daniel looked at her as if that laugh alone had brought spring back to the valley. The door shut quickly. Emma wiped her cheek. "I am not ready to give you an answer about anything beyond today," she said. Daniel nodded. "Then today is enough. And today we finish what Silas started." His face changed. Together they went back inside. By noon, Judge Alder had taken statements from everyone who had been at the ranch during the fire. Eli showed the torn black cloth. The deputy compared it with a coat found abandoned near the freight yard. Daniel handed over the receipt proving Ward Freight had shorted his feed order. Emma gave the judge the private ledger page, the false boundary pressure papers, and her father's documents. By sunset, Pine Hollow knew the truth. Silas Ward was caught 2 days later at a stage stop north of Helena, trying to leave the territory under his mother's maiden name. He was brought back under guard, not dragged through the street, not harmed, not made into a spectacle, but delivered to the same courthouse where he had tried to turn the law into a weapon. Justice in Pine Hollow came through ink, witnesses, ledgers, and a judge who had finally seen enough. Silas lost his lending license first. Then his office. Then the respect he had mistaken for fear. Money was returned where records proved wrongdoing. Some debts were reduced. Some were erased entirely. Ruth Bellamy kept her goats. Henry Lowe recovered enough to buy back a mule before harvest. Mrs. Pritchard made a point of walking past Silas's closed office every Saturday with a basket full of bread she had no intention of sharing. Emma's lawful balance remained $8. She paid it herself. $2 at a time. Daniel did not offer to pay it. That was how she knew he understood. Winter loosened its grip. The blackened barn wall was repaired. Mercy's brass nameplate was fastened back to his stall, brighter after Emma polished it with ash and cloth. The Broken Star kitchen remained the place where neighbors brought papers when numbers felt wrong. Emma began keeping books not only for Daniel, but for Ruth, Henry, and 2 small ranches east of Pine Hollow. She charged fair wages. She did not undercharge. When Daniel asked if she wanted her own desk in his office, she said yes after making him move 3 boxes of old receipts and promise never again to store legal papers beside horseshoe nails. He promised. Eli said the office had never looked so frightened in its life. By April, Emma's rides to the Broken Star became less about necessity and more about rhythm. Mercy knew the road so well that he turned at Daniel's gate before Emma touched the reins. The farmhouse remained hers. Her father's land stayed in her name. Daniel never suggested otherwise. Some evenings, Daniel walked her home beside Mercy, leading his own horse slowly so the road would last longer. They spoke of cattle, seed orders, weather, and sometimes her father. Not in a way that reopened grief, but in a way that let it sit with them without being lonely. One evening in May, Daniel stopped at the Whitaker fence line. The sun was low. The lower pasture glowed green after rain. Mercy grazed nearby, his white tail flicking at flies. Daniel removed his hat. Emma looked at him. That is a serious hat removal. He almost smiled. It is a serious question. Her heart knew before he spoke. But he did not rush, he did not assume, he did not take her hand until she offered it. Emma Whitaker, he said, I love you. I respect your land, your work, your horse, your pride, and the life you built before I was brave enough to knock on your door. I would be honored to build the rest beside you, not over you, not ahead of you, beside you. Emma's eyes filled. This time she let them. And if I say yes, she asked softly, what happens to my farm? It remains yours. And Mercy will continue believing he owns both properties. She laughed through her tears. And if you decide something important without asking me? Daniel's expression grew solemn. Then I will deserve whatever lecture follows. Several lectures. I expect no less. Emma looked toward the pasture, toward the house her father had built, toward the road that had once carried her to Daniel's gate with $10 worth of desperation, and a horse worth more than any price. Then she looked back at Daniel. Yes, she said, I will marry you. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if the words had humbled him. Then and only then, he kissed her hand. They married in June at the little white church in Pine Hollow. Ruth Bellamy cried before the vows began. Mrs. Pritchard brought enough pies to feed the county. Henry Lowe arrived with his new mule tied proudly outside. Amos Reed sat in the front row with Mercy's old sale book tucked under his arm, claiming he was there only to make sure no one disputed ownership of the groom. Eli stood beside Daniel and whispered, just loud enough for Emma to hear, I predicted June after the fire. Daniel murmured, you predicted April 1st. I adjusted for stubbornness. Emma smiled so brightly that Daniel forgot whatever reply he meant to give. After the ceremony, they did not ride away from her father's farm. They rode toward it first. Emma wanted to stop there before going to the Broken Star. Daniel understood without being told. Mercy carried her through the lower pasture while Daniel rode beside her. The grass moved in the warm wind. The farmhouse windows shone in the afternoon light. Nothing about it looked rich, but everything about it looked loved. Emma dismounted and stood by the fence. For a moment she could almost see her father there, one hand on the rail, his hat pushed back, his eyes full of that quiet knowing he had carried to the end. Daniel stood beside her. "He knew," Emma said. Daniel looked over the pasture. "Yes," he said, "I think he did." Emma held her wedding flowers in one hand and Mercy's reins in the other. Her father had not left her an easy life. He had left her something better, the strength to survive hard days, the proof to fight dishonest men, a horse named Mercy, a final instruction, and a man who had to learn that love was not rescue but respect made steady over time. Years later, people in Pine Hollow still told the story of the woman who rode to the Broken Star Ranch to sell her white horse for $10. But Emma always corrected them. "I did not ride there to sell him," she would say, smiling as Mercy grazed fat and shameless between two properties he believed belonged entirely to him. "I rode there because my father gave me one last direction, and I was finally wise enough to follow it." And whenever Daniel heard her say it, he would touch the old leather braid on his wrist and remember the promise he had nearly failed, then spent the rest of his life keeping properly. So if this story touched your heart, remember this before you leave. Real love does not take the reins from your hands. It walks beside you until you are ready to trust the road again. And under the wide Montana sky, with Mercy shining white in the evening pasture and two homes standing open to the same sunset, Emma finally understood what her father had meant. A good man would treat the horse right. A better one would learn how to treat her right too.